They told me the will was simple. Split 3 ways. Just like Dad always said. But the day after the funeral, I found out I was written out entirely. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. Not when my stepmother, Janine, handed me a 1-paragraph email from their lawyer saying, due to recent updates to the estate plan, Miss Catherine Boyd is no longer named as a beneficiary. I reread that line 3 times. No longer named. As if I had been erased, I looked at Janine. Her lips were pursed into something that might have been a smile, if not for the tension in her jaw. Behind her, my half-brothers, Adam and Joel. Couldn't even meet my eyes. I was the only child from Dad's first marriage. The nurse who took his calls when Janine was at dinner parties. The one who took unpaid leave when his stroke hit. The one who changed his feeding tube when he couldn't afford a second private nurse, and now, I was the one cut out. I'm sure this must be hard for you, Janine said smoothly, as if I'd been denied a parking spot, not a legacy. But your father's wishes were clear. That's what she said. Wishes, but I remember what my father wished. He wished I'd go back to school. He wished I'd buy a house one day. He wished I'd never have to rely on a man. He told me he set up a trust, half for me, split the rest. He told me not to let anyone talk me out of what was mine, and now he was gone. And I had nothing, not even a copy of the will. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. My phone buzzed once, a text from Joel. It was Dad's choice, Kat. Don't make this ugly. Ugly, like I hadn't spoon-fed our father when they couldn't be bothered to visit. Like I wasn't the one who slept on the recliner in his hospice room every night for the last 3 weeks. I didn't answer. I just kept driving until I reached the tiny apartment I'd been renting for years, a 1-bedroom near the hospital, where I worked nights as a trauma nurse. Still in my scrubs from the night before. Still wearing the hospital badge that said "in charge right now." That night, I took a shower so hot it scalded. Not because I needed to be clean, but because I needed to feel something sharp that wasn't betrayal. Then I sat on the floor with a glass of wine and pulled out the old notebook I kept in my desk drawer. It was Dad's. His loopy handwriting filled the first few pages. And on the top of one, in thick black ink, he had written estate plan, 3 parts. K gets 50%. Balance equals A and J. I traced the letters with my finger. He told me he'd finalized it 2 years ago. But this didn't match the email Janine handed me. The math didn't match. The timeline didn't match. And most of all, Dad didn't match the man who'd signed me away like I was a mistake. Something was wrong. And I was done being polite. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called out for the first time in 4 years. Didn't explain. Didn't apologize. Just said, family emergency, and hung up. I poured a black coffee, opened my laptop, and typed, how to request a copy of a will in probate court. Because here's what I knew, if Janine had filed that will legally, it would be a matter of public record. And if she hadn't, then she was bluffing. The county court website was a maze. But I navigated it like I was charting vitals. Precise. Unemotional. Focused. And there it was, one filing from 2 weeks before my father died. Filed by Janine S. Boyd, executor. Attached, a scanned PDF labeled, Last Will and Testament, Revision Number 4. Revision 4? I paid the $4.99 for a certified copy. Downloaded it. Then sat there staring at the first line. I, Richard D. Boyd, being of sound mind and body. By page 2, the betrayal was inked. Joel and Adam were each to receive 45%. Janine the remaining 10%, and the house stopped me? My name wasn't even mentioned. It wasn't even a cruel cut. It was a deletion. A surgical erase. I clicked through the metadata on the PDF, a tiny detail most people wouldn't notice. Created date, June 2nd. Modified, June 5. My father was unconscious from his stroke by May 28th. He never spoke another word. He never moved his right hand. He never signed a damn thing. I closed my eyes and whispered one sentence aloud, they forged it. There was no thunderclap. No gasping realization. Just cold air filling my lungs with the weight of knowing, and I remembered something. A moment, 1 month before he slipped into silence, we were watching the late news in his den. Commercial break. He turned his face toward me and said, "You'll be okay, Kat." I made sure. And then he squeezed my hand. I opened my phone and took a picture of the notebook page. Then another. Then I opened a new folder in Google Drive. I labeled it, Truth, because from that moment on, I wasn't grieving. I was building a case. I called a lawyer that afternoon, a woman I'd met during a hospital intake 2 years earlier. Her name was Angela Dorsey. Sharp eyes. Steel voice. She was listed under probate and estate litigation. I left a voicemail. "Hi, this is Catherine Boyd. I believe my father's will was altered after he lost capacity. I need help." She called me back in less than 45 minutes. By 5 p.m., we were on a Zoom call. Angela's background was minimalist. Clean bookshelf, no photos. Her questions were exact. Her tone, blunt. "Do you have any documented proof of his previous intentions?" "Yes." I held up the notebook. His handwriting. A trust split 50/25/25. Any communication from him stating that after the most recent will was supposedly signed. He was already nonverbal by then. Angela paused. "Then this is serious." I exhaled. The first real breath all day. Angela continued. "If we can prove your father lacked testamentary capacity when the latest version was signed, and especially if we can prove undue influence or forgery, that will can be invalidated." She leaned forward. "And if we prove fraud, the court can reinstate a previous will or distribute assets intestate. Either way, you're back in the picture." A flicker of something, not hope, but resolve, ignited in me. "What do you need from me?" I asked. She didn't blink. "Everything." Angela wasn't warm. She didn't coddle me or act like this was some hallmark moment of redemption. She treated it like war, and I followed suit. The next morning, she sent me a checklist. All medical records from the last 3 months of Dad's life, original will, if available, prior communications from him about estate planning, any handwritten notes, names of witnesses present around the time of the new will, list of who had access to him in his final weeks. I opened that email at 6:42 a.m. and by noon, I had half the items on the list. Hospital records? Easy, I worked there. HIPAA be damned, I knew which records to request and how to code the inquiry without raising a red flag. It wasn't illegal. But it wasn't nice either. And nice had left the building the day I got erased. I drove to Dad's house that afternoon. Not to speak, I didn't want to see Janine's masquerade lies smiling back at me. Just to retrieve the box Dad always kept under his bed. It had a broken lock and a scratched top, but inside? That box held everything. Old tax returns. Trust drafts. Birth certificates, and the previous will. Signed. Dated. Notarized. March 3rd. Just 4 months before he slipped into silence. In that version, my name was everywhere. I was named trustee of his healthcare directive. I was the 50% heir to his liquid assets. I was his daughter. I sat in my car gripping that will like it was the only anchor left in a sea of betrayal. Then the flashbacks started coming. Not loud. Not cinematic, just little things. The way Janine had insisted on moving all mail to digital management. The way Joel made a comment about things changing soon in late May. The way Dad winced when Adam visited, like he knew he was being handled. Angela reviewed the old will the next day. "Good," she said. "Very good. This one's coherent. Balanced. Reflective of actual family dynamics." She compared the two side by side. The new one had no notary stamp. No witness signatures visible. Just a line of initials that didn't match Dad's handwriting. Angela's face didn't change, but her tone dropped. This might not just be undue influence. This might be forgery. That word chilled me. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was precise. Cold. Legal. Sharp. Like the truth finally had teeth, she explained our next step, a formal petition to challenge the will's validity based on incapacity and potential fraud. Subpoena. The witnesses Janine listed. Request handwriting analysis. Freeze the estate. It sounded like something from a movie. But it wasn't. It was probate law. And it was slow. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. But because I couldn't stop remembering the smell of my father's old cologne, the one he used to wear on Sundays when he took me to the park. I remembered how he used to wipe his glasses before signing anything, squinting carefully. There was no way he had signed a will in June. No way he initialed anything in his state. No way he betrayed me, not truly, and if the courts needed proof, I'd give them more than proof. I'd give them a reckoning, the petition to contest. The will was filed on a rainy Monday morning. Angela's paralegal called me to confirm, it's officially in motion. Janine will be served by Friday. And just like that, it was real. A legal document with my name on it. Filed in a courthouse just 10 miles from the home I'd grown up in, the same home they now claimed as theirs. I didn't celebrate. I didn't text anyone. There was no one left to text. Instead, I went to work. Back to the trauma floor. Back to the beep of vitals and the sterile calm of controlled chaos. It was almost soothing, watching a machine keep someone alive when the people around them weren't capable of the same, but in the quiet hours, between charting and checking IVs, I couldn't stop seeing the look Janine gave me at the funeral. Not grief. Not even pity. Just calculation, like she knew I'd been boxed out. And she thought I wouldn't have the spine to fight. She didn't know me, she never did. By Thursday, Janine had been served, and that night, Joel called. I let it go to voicemail. He tried again. And again. On the fourth ring, I picked up. Kat, what the hell are you doing? Protecting what's mine. You're making this ugly. No. I'm finally seeing it for what it is. He sighed, that performative older brother sigh he used whenever I broke from his script. Dad made his decision. No, Joel. You and Janine made his decisions for him. Once he couldn't speak. There was a pause. Then the bite in his voice returned. You're going to ruin what's left of this family. I laughed, short and flat. What family? He hung up. I didn't cry. Didn't even flinch. The line had been crossed months ago, I was just now acknowledging it. Angela followed up the next day. Janine's lawyer responded. They're pushing back. Claim your father had full mental capacity and that the witnesses can attest to it. Witnesses? I asked. Who? She read the names aloud. I recognized none of them. Not one family friend. Not a neighbor. Not even the nurse who helped with Dad's feeding schedule. Angela continued, we're requesting sworn affidavits and pulling video surveillance from the hospice facility. If he couldn't sign his own name, they're going to have to explain that. A beat of silence passed. Then I said, what if they faked his signature? Then this becomes criminal. The word didn't frighten me. It thrilled me. Let them sweat. Let them explain why a man with right side paralysis could write 3 neat initials in June. Angela was clear. This could take months. That they'd stall, delay, bury us in procedural motions. But that was fine. I had patience. And pain makes a damn good fuel source. That weekend, I went back to Dad's house one last time. Janine was out. I had one key left, one they didn't know I still had. I walked through the halls slowly. The living room still smelled like the leather recliner he died in. I stood in front of the fireplace where his college diploma used to hang, now replaced by one of Janine's oil paintings. Garish. Empty. Much like her, I opened his old cabinet. There, behind the file folders, was a small wooden box. Inside, one Rolex, scratched, his wedding band from his first marriage, a flash drive with a label that read EKB, Trust, Draft. I took it. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like I was finally standing up in a room full of people who had tried to keep me sitting. When I got home and plugged in the drive, a Word doc opened dated April 5th. Title: Final Wishes Draft for Review. The contents matched the handwritten notes in Dad's journal. 50%. Me. In his words, she stood by me when the rest of them ran. That line broke me. Just for a moment, but I didn't cry. I made a backup, and I named it, for the court. Angela's voice on the phone was sharper than usual. This changes things, she said after I forwarded the flash drive contents. If we can authenticate that document, show the metadata. Prove it was drafted by your father prior to his incapacitation, it strengthens our position tenfold. I sat at my kitchen table, still in scrubs, coffee gone cold in my hand. It's not signed, I said. It's just a draft. But drafts show intent, she replied. Especially when they align with handwritten notes and contradict. The final, contested will. That word again, contested. I never thought I'd be in a legal battle over my own father's voice, trying to prove what he meant versus what they made him say. Angela moved quickly. She hired a forensic document examiner, a man named Keith Rossner, to analyze both wills and the handwritten notes. We gave him Dad's old journals, the March notarized will, the June version filed by Janine, the flash drive copy. It would take a few weeks. In the meantime, Janine's attorney filed a motion to dismiss our challenge. Angela shut it down in a 3-page rebuttal that read like a knife in legal prose. The respondent attempts to gaslight the legal process into believing her version of events without producing a single piece of authenticating evidence. We have drafts, metadata, medical timelines, and motive. This is not a dismissal, it's a reckoning. I printed that paragraph out. Taped it to the inside of my closet door. Read it every morning before work, because Angela had given me something I hadn't felt in months. Not just strategy. Not just justice. But language. Words that cut through the fog like a scalpel. A week later, the handwriting expert sent a preliminary report. The June will? The initials didn't match my father's writing. The pen pressure was too smooth, not shaky, not right-handed as expected. Rossner concluded that the document shows signs of mechanical tracing or assisted formation. Highly likely not written by Richard D. Boyd. Angela called me that afternoon. We're adding fraud to the filing. I nodded silently, then asked, do you think she'll back down? Angela's laugh was short. People like Janine don't step down. They only step deeper. That night, I started cataloging my father's voicemails till I had dozens saved. Old ones. Birthday messages. Random check-ins. One in particular from 5 months before his stroke stood out. Hey, Kat, just checking in. I talked to the lawyer today. Everything's in place, you're taken care of, sweetheart. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You've always done right by me. That voicemail became Exhibit C. Angela had it transcribed, time-stamped, and verified by a sound engineer to confirm voice authenticity. We were building a fortress. One documented truth at a time. Meanwhile, Joel was getting nervous. He started posting cryptic status updates on Facebook. Family is supposed to support you, not sue you. People change when money's involved. I ignored them. But I screenshotted everything, because the truth wasn't just what I remembered. It was what they were revealing. Even as they tried to hide. Janine, however, stayed quiet. Too quiet, until one day, I got a letter. Certified mail. No return address. Inside, a typed note, you don't want this to go to court, Catherine. We can arrange something. Privately. No lawyers. No signature, just a phone number. I stared at it for a long time, then handed it to Angela. She added it to our pile of evidence. Attempted coercion, she muttered. Keep everything. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. They'd pushed me out of the will. Tried to erase my name like I never mattered, but they forgot one thing. I'm a nurse. I know how to keep people alive, and how to document exactly how they die. The court date was set. March 14th. 3 months from the day my father died. Angela said it was fast, practically lightning speed for probate court. But to me, it felt glacial. Every day was a reminder that they were still living in his house. That the art on the walls didn't belong to her. That the dining table had once been mine, when I was 8, eating pancakes Dad burned on purpose. Just to make me laugh, I avoided that part of town. But the past had a way of following me. One night, I stopped by the pharmacy after a double shift. As I reached for a bottle of ibuprofen, I heard my name, Catherine. I turned. Joel. Hair slicked back like he was playing businessman. Eyes a little too wide. Like he wasn't sleeping. We stood there in awkward silence, between toothpaste and painkillers. He spoke first. This whole thing, you really think Dad would have wanted this? I know exactly what he wanted. My voice was low. Unshaking, Joel scoffed. He was barely there at the end. You think that one note in his diary means anything? I took a step closer. He wasn't barely there when he wrote a draft on April 5th. Or when he called me to tell me I'd be okay. Or when he signed the real will in March, the one your precious wife decided wasn't convenient enough. Joel looked away. He didn't argue. He just muttered, "You're gonna tear this family apart." "There is no family," I said. And walked out. By the time I got to my car, I was shaking. Not from fear, but from control, because every time they tried to spin this as drama, I answered with documents. Every accusation? I met with a timestamp. Every manipulation? I answered with metadata. Angela filed a motion to depose the hospice nurse. The one who'd been scheduled the day the new will was supposedly signed. Her name was Myra Whitaker. Late 50s, a calm voice. We brought her in on a video call. Angela asked one question. Do you recall Mr. Boyd signing anything on June 5th? Myra didn't even blink. No, ma'am. Mr. Boyd had no ability to hold a pen by then. His right side was completely flaccid. No motor function. Would he have been able to understand complex legal language at that point? No, she said simply. He was on high-dose morphine. He was fading. We added her deposition to the case file. Next, the handwriting analyst finished his final report. A 27-page breakdown. The conclusion, the initials on the June 5th document were not produced by the decedent. Strong evidence of tracing, assisted movement, or third party. Fabrication. Angela smiled when she read that. The judge is going to have a hard time ignoring this. But Janine's attorney didn't back down. Instead, they filed a motion to discredit me. Claimed I had an unstable relationship with the decedent and was estranged at various points throughout adulthood. They attached old emails. Ones I'd written in anger, years ago, when Dad married Janine without telling me. Ones where I accused him of being weak. Ones I regretted. Angela wasn't fazed. We'll address it, she said. People fight. Estrangement doesn't negate fraud. But it hit me. How far they were willing to go. How even my grief, my messiest moments, were now exhibits in a courtroom battle. I stayed up that night rereading those emails. And then I wrote anew. 1.to Angela, I know I wasn't always graceful. I know I fought with him. But I also took care of him when no one else did. I cleaned the wounds. I held his hand while he cried. That doesn't erase the past, but it should count for something. She responded the next morning. For words, it counts. Trust me. 2 weeks before the hearing, I received a subpoena request from Angela. Janine's team wants your journals, she told me. I paused. My journals? Yes. They're trying to prove emotional instability. Fishing expedition. They think you'll crack. I almost laughed. If they thought scribbled notes about heartbreak and hospital shifts would rattle me, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Give them everything, I said. Let them read about the night I cleaned my father's bedsores when Janine couldn't stomach it. Angela chuckled. Copy that. But privately, I started scanning those old pages. Not because I was afraid, but because I remembered something. A moment, maybe a year before the stroke. A Wednesday morning. Dad was sipping black coffee on my porch, rambling about taxes, and I had written, he said today, if something ever happens, don't let Janine touch the will. She only cares about the house. I laughed. He didn't. I flagged that page. Scanned it. Sent it to Angela, another nailed up. By now, the case file was over 300 pages. Evidence folders packed with text messages from Dad about his trust, voicemails confirming I was his primary contact, emails from his attorney referencing me as executor in the March draft, surveillance footage from the facility showing Janine visiting alone on June 5th, but not staying long enough for any legal consultation. Angela said we had enough to proceed to full trial if they didn't fold. And I hoped they wouldn't. I wanted this in the open, because for months, I'd been watching them move through the world like nothing happened. Joel posting vacation photos. Adam buying a new truck. Janine wearing my mother's old wedding necklace in a Facebook photo captioned "Always treasured." And all I wanted was one moment where they couldn't look away. Where the lights were too bright, the air too thin, and the lies too loud to ignore. That moment came sooner than I thought. That we were granted an early hearing to present key findings before trial. A procedural session, not a final judgment. But it would all be public. Documents. Statements. Timeline. Entered into the court record. Angela warned me, they'll try to humiliate you. Discredit you. Don't take the bait. I didn't flinch. I told her, let them come. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled. Cold. No jury, just a probate judge in square glasses who looked like he hated everything equally. Janine sat across the aisle in a tailored gray suit. No emotion. Not even when I entered. Joel and Adam flanked her like hired security. I noticed Adam couldn't look me in the eyes. But Joel? He smirked. The judge began. Angela stood, and then, line by line, she dismantled their narrative of the March will, the medical records, the handwriting analysis, the video proof Janine lied about who was present, the voicemail from Dad. Finally, Angela held up the draft on the flash drive. Your Honor, this document shows the decedent's true intent. It references Catherine Boyd by name and aligns with all prior versions. The contested will stands alone, unsupported, unverified, and contradicted by every factual measure. Janine's lawyer stood. Tried to spin it. Said my father was mercurial, that he changed his mind often, that disinheritance is not uncommon in complex family dynamics. But the judge wasn't moved. He looked at Janine. Mrs. Boyd, were you present during the June 5th signing? Yes, Your Honor, she said calmly. And who witnessed the signature? She gave the names. Strangers. Angela stood again. We've contacted both witnesses. One never met the decedent. The other was out of state on June 5th. Silence. Then the judge said it will proceed to trial. But understand, the court takes forgery very seriously. If the allegations are proven, criminal referrals will follow. I didn't look at Janine. I didn't need to. For the first time, I felt it, the ground shifting beneath them. And the truth rising, slow, cold, undeniable. The fallout from that hearing came fast. Janine's attorney filed a motion for continuance, claiming they needed more time to gather documentation and respond to unexpected evidence. Angela's reply was razor clean. The evidence was not unexpected. It was simply inconvenient. The judge granted them a 2-week extension. No more. That gave us 14 days. 14 days to sharpen every blade. 14 days to strip away every layer of lies. 14 days before everything came into the light. Angela called me that night. We've got enough to win this civilly. But if they forge that will, the court can refer this for criminal prosecution. Will they? I asked. If we push it hard enough, she said. But that's your decision, Catherine. We can restore your inheritance, your legal standing, and walk away. Or we can go for more. Push for fraud. Make it public. I didn't answer right away. Because part of me wanted peace. But a louder part wanted accountability. I thought about the months Janine lived in that house like she earned it. The way Joel called me dramatic for asking questions. The way they'd smiled at Dad's funeral. Like wolves in pearls and cufflinks. I thought about being erased. No, I said finally. We don't walk away. We finish this. Angela exhaled once. I hoped you'd say that. The next day, I took time off work. Officially. For the first time in years. Filed the paperwork, handed over my badge, and told the nurse manager, I've got something to finish. Then I rented a storage unit. Because win or lose, I knew I wasn't keeping that apartment much longer. Dad's trust, the one Janine tried to bury, included the house. And I planned to walk through that front door with a key in my hand. And legal proof in my pocket. The media picked up the case by day 10. A local courthouse blogger published a breakdown. Will war, daughter challenges stepmother over disputed estate. They even included a screenshot of Janine's name on the court filing. 2 days later, a neighbor posted on Nextdoor, is it true what I heard about the Boyds? That poor daughter. Always saw her helping Mr. Boyd when no one else came around. The tide was turning. Not in whispers, in record, and that's when Adam cracked. He called me. From a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this wasn't about threats. It was about fear. Kat, he said, voice low. I didn't know. Didn't know what? That the signature was fake. I swear. I thought. It was just a new will. Janine said Dad wanted to simplify things. I didn't say anything. He kept talking. She told Joel it was taken care of. She said you wouldn't fight. Said you were too tired, too emotional. She said it was better. This way, less mess. I exhaled through my nose. She underestimated me. I didn't want any of this, he said. I just wanted to get through the funeral. You got through it, I said flatly. I lived through it. He paused. Then, if I write a statement, a real one, will it help? I didn't have to ask Angela. Yes. But no deals. No guarantees. You do this because it's right, not because you want immunity. He agreed. 3 days later, Angela had a signed affidavit from Adam Boyd, admitting Janine told them the will had been handled, admitting he never saw the document signed, admitting Dad was already barely responsive. By early June it was the crack we needed. And cracks become collapses. Angela filed the affidavit under a new section, affirmation from co-beneficiary, contradicting executor's statements. The judge allowed it into evidence. And just like that, their united front was broken. Janine didn't respond. Didn't call. Didn't text, but Joel did. A single message, you've made your point. He was wrong. I wasn't making a point, I was reclaiming a voice they tried to silence with ink and lies. A trial prep started like a storm gathering on the horizon, slowly, then all at once. Angela brought in another litigator for the big day, a woman named Priya Singh. Calm, devastating, and terrifyingly methodical. When she shook my hand, she said, I don't do hand-holding. I do winning. You okay with that? I nodded. Because I didn't need comfort anymore. I needed closure with teeth. Angela and Priya walked me through what to expect: direct testimony, cross-examination, timeline verification, character attacks from Janine's team. They would try to reduce me to the emotional daughter. Paint me as greedy, unstable, or vindictive. So we prepared. Every record. Every text. Every voicemail. Even the videos I had of Dad, quiet moments on my porch, him talking softly about leaving something real behind. The day before trial, Angela looked at me across her desk. Are you sure? She asked. You can still settle. They'll offer something. You'll get part of the estate, maybe the house. We walk away, no criminal proceedings. I stared out the window of her office, watching a garbage truck grind down the street. I don't want what they're offering, I said. I want the truth, on record. I want it to hurt. She didn't argue. She just nodded once and handed me a binder. Then let's burn it down clean. Court opened at 9:02 a.m. Janine arrived first. Tailored navy suit, pearl earrings, no eye contact. Joel followed, face pale. Adam wasn't with them. I sat on the opposite bench, alone. No family. Just a folder in my lap and a line drawn in the sand. Opening statements began. Priya stood, still. In her spine, she didn't speak like a lawyer. She spoke like someone handing back a stolen name. This case is not about grief. It is about deception. It is about a dying man's voice being replaced by those who wanted his silence to profit them. It is about a daughter, not estranged, not distant, but erased. We intend to prove that the contested will is not just a misrepresentation, but a fabrication. Janine's lawyer followed, calm and rehearsed. Families are messy. Regret is common. But regret does not equal fraud. The decedent made his decisions. We honor them. But no one on their side had Dad's handwriting. No one had his voice, recorded and timed. No one had the March will. We did. Testimony began first. Myra, the hospice nurse. She was clear, unwavering. No ability to write. No mental capacity to make informed legal decisions in June. Next, the handwriting analyst. He broke down the inconsistencies with surgical precision. The pressure pattern indicates a third party, not Mr. Boyd. The initials are stylistically incompatible with his prior signatures. Then, Adam. He sat in the witness chair like he'd swallowed gravel. Read his statement. Admitted he'd never seen Dad sign the new will. Admitted Janine told them not to make waves. Admitted he'd seen me caring for Dad when no one else did. Janine didn't look at him. Didn't blink. Then it was my turn. I took the stand. Swore in Angela. Asked the questions gently, but precisely. She guided me through the years of care. The unpaid leave. The tube feeding. Then she asked, did your father ever tell you you'd be removed from his will? No. Did he ever express the opposite? Yes. Repeatedly. She handed me the notebook. The flash drive. The voicemail transcript, all entered into evidence. Then Janine's lawyer stood. His voice was like syrup over glass. Ms. Boyd, you've stated that your relationship with your father was close. Yes. And yet, you once wrote to him, quote, you made your bed. I won't be cleaning it. Correct? Yes. I was angry. But I did clean it. Literally. He smiled, like he thought he'd found the crack. Is it possible you're projecting guilt into this legal action? No, I said, staring straight at Janine. I'm projecting truth. And you don't get to gaslight the dead. That line caught in the silence. Even the court reporter paused. No more questions. We recessed for the day, but I already knew they weren't winning this. They were unraveling. The second day of trial was quieter, but far more lethal. No theatrics. No outbursts. Just the quiet dismantling of a lie. Angela opened with the estate's digital trail. She brought in a cybersecurity consultant, a gray-haired woman named Lana Briggs, who had pulled the metadata from the flash drive and the PDF Janine had submitted. Lana walked the court through the dates with chilling clarity. The document labeled as Final Will was created on a home computer registered to Janine S. Boyd, not Richard D. Boyd. The user login was Janine's. Janine's attorney stood. Is it possible Mr. Boyd dictated the will to his wife? And she merely typed it? Possible, yes, Lana said, not missing a beat. But not credible. Because on June 5, the date the document was created, Mr. Boyd's medical records show he was heavily sedated and nonverbal. The file was also edited multiple times that day, and not once was his user profile or voice software used. Could she have transcribed his wishes? Not without a time machine, Lana said. Because the original will naming Catherine Boyd was still listed in his cloud backups until June 1st, when it was suddenly deleted. The judge adjusted his glasses. Angela pressed further. Are you saying Janine Boyd deleted the previous version of the will from his cloud account? Yes. The courtroom didn't gasp. But I saw Joel lower his head. And Janine's shoulders stiffen. Angela rested her case. And then Janine took the stand. She was calm. Controlled. Every inch the grieving widow. I loved Richard. He trusted me with everything. And near the end, he told me he didn't want Catherine burdened. He said she had her own life. That she didn't need the money. Angela stood slowly. And yet he told her the opposite in multiple voicemails. Do you believe he was lying? I believe he changed his mind. Angela approached the stand. Mrs. Boyd, do you recognize this journal entry? She handed over a copy of Dad's handwriting, the one with the trust breakdown, 50% to me, 25% to each son. Janine squinted. I don't recall ever seeing this. Angela raised her eyebrows. Interesting. It was in the box under your shared bed. Janine blinked. Just once, then Angela handed her the flash drive. Do you recognize this? Yes. It was Richard's. But he was drafting. He didn't finish. Angela turned to the judge. No further questions. We recessed. The courtroom emptied, but I stayed behind. Sat in the third row, hands folded in my lap. Alone until Joel approached. He didn't sit. He didn't even look at me at first, then he spoke. She said it was temporary, he muttered. She told us the money would be handled later. That Dad was protecting you in other ways. I stared at him. You believed that? I wanted to. He finally looked at me. Red-rimmed eyes. No one ever thinks they're the villain while it's happening. I stood. Grabbed my coat. Looked him in the eye. You didn't think at all. He didn't follow me out that night. I slept. For 6 hours straight. No dreams. No spiraling thoughts. Just silence, the kind of silence that feels earned, the kind that comes after you stop being afraid of the truth. The final day of trial started with gray skies and a courtroom full of thunder. There were no cameras, but the gallery was packed. Estate watchers, local law students, and one reporter scribbling everything with furious speed. Janine's mask was still on, but the cracks showed in the corner of her mouth. Angela opened with what she called her anchor. My father's notarized March will. Signed. Witnessed. Stamped. It wasn't just a legal document, it was a timestamp of who he was before the manipulation began. Angela held it up like scripture. This is the last verified document bearing the decedent's uncoerced signature. It reflects decades of intent. It aligns with witness statements. It aligns with physical capability. The June version does none of that. Then she did something I didn't expect. She asked to replay my father's voicemail in court. The one where he said, "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You've always done right by me." The judge allowed it, and as his voice echoed in that cold chamber, soft, gravelly, unmistakably him, something shifted. Even the court reporter's hands hesitated. It was a ghost speaking. A man who had been silenced, now testifying in the only way he still could. Janine didn't blink. But her hands clenched the arms of her chair. White knuckles. No ring. The defense scrambled. Their final witness was a handwriting expert who'd never seen my father's journals, only the disputed initials. Angela shredded him in 5 minutes. You didn't know the decedent wrote left-handed until after his stroke? He hesitated. No further questions. And then, closing arguments. Angela's was surgical. No emotion. Just if we allow wealth to rewrite memory, then truth becomes a commodity. Catherine Boyd is not asking for a fantasy. She is asking that this court recognize what was true before silence was weaponized. We ask that the march will be reinstated. The June document declared fraudulent and restitution ordered for legal damages and emotional duress. Janine's lawyer stood next. And to his credit, he tried to frame it as the interpretation, family friction, end-of-life complexity. But the judge wasn't buying it. He didn't even let them finish. He raised a hand mid-sentence and said, "I've heard enough." Everyone froze. The judge leaned forward. "This court finds the June 5 document invalid due to lack of capacity and credible evidence of forgery. The March will is hereby reinstated. The estate is to be divided. Per that will. All assets distributed in accordance." He paused, looked directly at Janine, "and this matter will be referred to the district attorney for further review regarding possible criminal forgery and obstruction of probate." Just like that, it was done. Gavel down. Legacy restored. I didn't cry. I didn't look at Janine. I walked out of the courtroom alone. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel hollow. I felt exact. Outside, Angela caught up to me. Handed me the court-certified order. "You won," she said. "No," I corrected her, gripping the paper tightly. "I proved it." The next week unfolded like the first true breath after being held underwater, and I met with the estate administrator to begin reinstating the March will. Everything Dad had planned, the 50% for me, the trust fund allocations, the medical directive naming me power of attorney, it was all back on the table. As if the lie had never been told, but the lie had been told. And it had nearly worked. But I stood in the master bedroom of Dad's house 3 days later, court order in hand, keys retrieved from the administrator's office. The same room where Janine had erased me. Where she'd taken his failing breath and tried to spin it into profit. The bed was stripped. Walls empty. Only the faintest imprint of her perfume lingered in the closet. I opened the windows. Let the stale air out. Let the silence breathe. There was no joy in reclaiming it. Only precision. I wasn't moving back in. But I would decide who did. Because it was mine to choose now. Joel and Adam received their 25% shares, as outlined in the March will. I didn't fight it. Didn't claw for more. I let the truth stand. Adam texted once, "You didn't have to keep it fair." "Thank you." I didn't reply. Fair wasn't the point. Integrity was. Angela called with one last update. "The DA is pursuing charges. Forgery. Perjury. Potential financial fraud. It'll be slow, but it's moving." I asked, "Will she serve time?" Angela sighed. "Hard to say. First-time offense. Privileged background. But her reputation? That's already gone. And that, I realized, was something prison couldn't touch. She'd never again be the grieving wife. Only the woman who tried to silence the daughter who never walked away. I boxed up the old files. Stored the journal, the flash drive, the printed emails. Everything I'd used to fight. Not as keepsakes, but as record. One afternoon, I drove out to the cemetery. Brought fresh-cut flowers. Sat by Dad's headstone. I read him the court order. Word for word. When I finished, I whispered, "They tried to take you from me. But I didn't let them." A breeze stirred. No sign. No spiritual moment. Just wind. Through the grass. But it felt like something settled. When I got home, I poured a glass of wine. Sat on my porch. And watched the sunset without checking my phone. No new emails. No legal updates. No tension in my chest, just stillness, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was proving something. I felt like I'd become someone who doesn't beg to be believed. Someone who documents. Someone who fights clean. And someone who knows that truth, when sharpened, cuts deeper than any lie. 3 months passed, the house was sold. Not for profit. I didn't need to squeeze every dollar out of it. I sold it to a single mother with 2 kids and a small dog. Who barked during the showing. She laughed and apologized. I said, "It's a good sign. The house finally needs laughter again." I took my half of the estate and did what Dad always told me to do. I built something. A foundation, small, focused, quiet, for low-income caregivers. Especially daughters like me. The kind who quit jobs to change bandages. Who sleep on recliners instead of beds. Who don't get thank yous, and definitely not inheritance. I called it the Boyd Trust. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had tried to bury me under a fake trust. I used the truth to build a real one. That Janine never contacted me. Never apologized. Last I heard, she moved to Nevada. Some whispered she changed her name. Didn't matter. Joel sent me a letter. Not an email. Actual ink. Cat, we were wrong. I was wrong. There's no excuse. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. You fought alone and I pretended not to see it. You deserved better. From all of us. Joel. I didn't write back. Some debts are too large for letters, but I didn't tear it up either. I kept it, because even apologies, when documented, carry weight. Angela and I stayed in touch. She said my case taught her something. That justice isn't about volume, it's about precision. That quiet women who take notes should terrify people. She was right. To AT night, I slept deeply. No court dates. No recordings playing on loop in my head, just a quiet apartment. A worn-out journal. And a cold glass of wine. I wasn't healed. But I wasn't hunted anymore either. That I'd won. Cleanly. Publicly. Legally, and not because I screamed. But because I remembered everything, and wrote it down. 6 months after the verdict, I received an invitation I didn't expect, a legal ethics panel at the State University. Angela was giving a guest lecture. She wanted me to speak, not as a lawyer, she said. As someone who fought the long way, and never got loud doing it. I almost said no. I wasn't a public speaker. I was a nurse. Someone who worked the overnight shifts and cleaned up other people's disasters, but something inside me said yes. I arrived wearing a black blazer Dad bought me when I finished my Right Now program. Still fit. Still sharp. Still mine. The room wasn't huge, maybe 40 students. But it felt like stepping onto a platform I didn't ask for, and suddenly realizing I'd been building it all along. Angela introduced me with exactly 7 words. She didn't sue for revenge. She sued for record. I spoke slowly. Not with drama. Just facts, how people smiled to your face while moving numbers behind your back. How family meant nothing without documentation. How women, especially caregivers, are expected to stay quiet when their names vanish from legal lines. I talked about strategy. Journals. Voicemails. Screenshots, how silence isn't the same as weakness, it's just a pause before precision. Afterward, a student asked me, would you do it again? Knowing the stress, the cost? I looked at her. Tired eyes. Maybe a story behind them, and I said, I'd do it faster. With better file names. They laughed. But it wasn't a joke. It was a blueprint. After the panel, Angela handed me a small card. If you ever want to go to law school, I'd write the recommendation. I didn't say yes. Didn't say no, just put the card in my wallet. Next to the folded note from Dad. The one he left in the kitchen drawer a year before his stroke. It said, to whoever finds this, you matter more than what they say about you. It was strange, watching the world move on when yours had been so still. Months after the court ruling, people stopped asking about the trial. No more whispering neighbors. No more courthouse reporters fishing for follow-ups. No more Joel. No more Janine, but I didn't forget. I didn't move on. I moved through. There's a difference. I still kept the original notebook in a locked drawer. Still had the flash drive, backed up in 3 places. Still remembered the timeline by heart, the exact days Dad slipped into silence, and the exact days they began rewriting his legacy. One morning, I visited the hospital where I used to work. Just to say hello. To thank the few nurses who'd covered my shifts while I fought in court. Marlene, the charge nurse, hugged me in the supply closet. You did what most of us dream of, she whispered. You stood up. And you won. I didn't feel like a hero. Just someone who got tired of being erased. Later, I took a slow walk through the ward. Room 308, the place where I'd once cared for Dad during his first stay. It was empty now, the bed stripped. But the sound of monitors still pulsed low and steady, like a heartbeat refusing to quit. I stood at the door for a while, just breathing. No tears. Just memory. Just presence. Outside, I passed a young woman in scrubs crying quietly into her phone. Something in her posture, hunched, silent, bruised by something unspoken, reminded me of myself. Months ago I didn't stop her. Didn't interrupt. But I left a folded card on the bench beside her. Inside, it read, a document everything. Speak when they least expect it. And if they try to silence you, bring receipts. It wasn't signed. Didn't need to be. I wasn't looking for recognition. I wasn't trying to be remembered. I was trying to make sure no one else got erased. The way I had done a year to the day after my father died. I visited the lawyer's office one last time. Angela met me in the hallway, holding a small envelope. No more filings, she smiled. Just closure. Inside was the final settlement check for damages. Not estate money, but court-ordered compensation from Janine. Fraud has a price, even when it doesn't leave handcuffs behind. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt surgical. Angela offered to take me to lunch, but I declined. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't celebrating. I took the check and drove straight to the bank. Deposited it into the Boyd Trust account without hesitation, then I drove to the coast. Dad always said the ocean fixed things. When Mom died, he drove us straight to the water, said we didn't need words, just wind. I found a quiet bluff. Sat on the hood of my car. Watched the waves below tear into the rocks like they'd been wronged. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like truth, sharp. Cold. But honest. I pulled out the letter Joel had written. Reread it for the 5th time. I still hadn't replied. Still didn't know if I would. He'd chosen silence when it mattered. And silence has a cost. I put it away. The wind shifted. My phone buzzed, a news alert, estate fraud conviction, California woman pleads no contest. In forgery case tied to disputed will. There was no photo. No names. But I knew. Janine had folded. No jail, but a guilty plea. Permanent record. No inheritance. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not out of satisfaction, but certainty. This was the end, and not because a court said so. But because the truth had stopped whispering. It had been written, stamped, and stored. I stood up, stretched my back, and whispered one last thing into the salt wind. He saw me. That's all that mattered. Then I drove home, not to escape, but to start something else. The first time I unlocked the new office space for the Boyd Trust, I stood in the doorway and waited for the silence to settle. The IT was a modest room above a strip of shops, old hardwood floors, paint that needed love, a window that overlooked a bus stop. But it was mine. Paid for with a forged will. Turn to justice. I didn't need a corner suite or polished glass doors. Just a desk. A file cabinet. And a mission. I hung a single photo on the wall, Dad sitting in the recliner, holding a coffee mug I'd made him in elementary school that read, #OneGirlDad. He hated it. But he never threw it away. Underneath the photo, I pinned a quote, truth doesn't shout. It waits. In our first month, the Boyd Trust funded 4 emergency caregiver grants. One of them went to a young woman caring for her grandfather. Alone, working double shifts and sleeping on the floor beside his hospital bed, she wrote a thank you email that ended with, I thought no one saw me. You did. That hit harder than any courtroom win. I didn't respond immediately. I let it sit in my inbox for a few hours. Then finally, I typed back, they tried to erase me too. Keep records. Keep receipts. And never let them convince you. That silence means surrender. She replied with a heart emoji and 3 words, you changed everything. Some days, that was enough. Other days, I thought about the past. I'd drive by the cemetery or past the old neighborhood. I'd see the house, now with a new swing set in the yard, and feel something tighten, then loosen. I never reached out to Janine. Not even after the conviction. There was no revenge left to serve. Only space. She was no longer a threat. She was just a lesson. Point one I carried into every form, every consult, every late night intake call at the trust, because people always ask, how do I fight this without losing everything? And I always answer, you fight it before it happens. You write it down. You prepare before they strike. And when they do, you don't flinch. It was a crisp October afternoon when I found the last piece of the puzzle, one I hadn't even realized was missing. I was sorting through a forgotten box of Dad's things, labeled simply Office Old. Inside were yellowing files, clipped receipts, and a metal tin of fountain pen ink. Buried at the bottom, a sealed envelope addressed in my father's handwriting, to Catherine, open only when you forget who you are. My hands shook, not from fear. From weight. The weight of timing. I'd been many things over the last year, erased, disbelieved, underestimated. But I hadn't forgotten. Not once. Still, I opened it. Inside, a single sheet of stationery. His handwriting, steady, deliberate. If you're reading this, it means something's been taken from you. Maybe everything. And if it has, then remember this, I saw you. I heard you. You mattered. You didn't need to be perfect to be mine, and if someone ever tries to bury that, fight not for the money. Not even for the name, but because the world changes when one woman refuses to be rewritten. I read it 3 times. Then once more, aloud. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't comfort. It was confirmation. I slipped it into a plastic sleeve and pinned it to the bulletin board behind my desk. Right above a checklist labeled Next Cases, because the work wasn't done. There would always be another woman. Another quiet daughter. Another lie dressed up in legalese, and I'd be there. Not as a martyr. Not as a hero, but as proof. That you can be silenced, and still speak. That you can be written out, and still write the ending. I turned off the office lights that evening and stood in the doorway. The wind outside was sharp. But inside, everything was still exactly as it should be. I never expected to testify again, but 10 months after the ruling, I was called as a witness in another probate fraud case. This time, I wasn't the one on trial. I was the precedent. Angela called it symbolic testimony. The case was eerily familiar, a niece written out of her aunt's will under suspicious timing. Digital documents. A mysteriously missing medical record. And a forged signature traced with mechanical precision. The state wanted to establish a pattern. Show that these weren't isolated events, that erasure had a blueprint, and women were too often its target. When I took the stand, I wore the same black blazer. The same calm expression. But this time, I wasn't defending myself. I was describing the anatomy of betrayal, how it starts with silence, grows through manipulation, and ends with someone in a tailored suit telling you that your name is no longer listed. The courtroom was larger than mine had been. There were cameras. The judge was younger, but no less tired. I told them about the journals, the metadata, the voicemail, the quiet, how I didn't scream, how I just gathered. I watched the woman on the plaintiff's bench, a schoolteacher, mid-40s, hands clasped in her lap like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. When I stepped down, she mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded once. That was enough. Afterward, Angela met me on the courthouse steps. "You're becoming the face of something," she said. I shook my head. "I don't want to be the face." She smiled. "You already are." But it wasn't about fame. It was about record. About one woman telling the truth so precisely that it couldn't be bent again. That night, I returned to my apartment. I poured a glass of wine. Opened a blank notebook. On the first page, I wrote every erasure starts with doubt. End it with evidence. Then I closed the book, because the next story? It would be hers. And I'd help her write it. 1 year. 12 months since the verdict. And I'd become something I never planned to be, a resource. A reference. A warning. People Started emailing the boy trust not just for help, but for advice on how to survive betrayal before it hits. I created templates, how to document verbal promises, how to request copies of legal documents without tipping your hand, how to recognize the red flags of a fraudulent will before it's too late. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was prevention. It was power through paperwork. Point one message came in from a woman in Nebraska. Her brother had suddenly taken power of attorney for their father. The will had been changed. She was being pushed out. She wrote, "They keep telling me not to make a scene. That I'm being emotional. But I know what's happening. I just don't know what to do next." I called her myself. Talked her through the first steps, ask for the original will. Get medical records. Start keeping a timeline, she cried. Then said something I'll never forget, "I didn't know I was allowed to fight." That's when I realized. This story was never just mine. It was happening everywhere, to women like me, silenced in the margins, trained to be polite while they're erased. And I wasn't just helping them reclaim money. I was helping them reclaim presence. I looked around my office that evening. Stacked folders. A new staffer, just hired last week. A whiteboard labeled, "Women who refuse to disappear." At the top, my name, below it, 22 others. And counting. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't wear capes. It files motions. It reads fine print. It asks the right questions at exactly the wrong moment for the people who counted on your silence. I locked the office. Stepped out into the cool night. And walked home alone, not empty. Not grieving. Just done, not with the work. But with the weight. They had changed the will in secret. I made it public, in court. On record. Forever, they thought they'd buried me under paperwork and politeness. They thought if they made it clean enough, quiet enough, I'd stay erased, but I didn't scream. I documented. I didn't beg. I built. I started this journey as the daughter no one believed. The one removed like a typo, unacknowledged, inconvenient. But I ended it as something else entirely, a witness. A record keeper. A blueprint. I didn't win because I was strong. I won because I was methodical. Because I understood that justice doesn't move at the speed of anger, it moves at the speed of evidence, and that's what I left behind, a trail of proof. For the next woman. For the next daughter. For the next erased name on the edge of a legal line. They changed the will. In secret. In silence. With the full confidence that I wouldn't fight, but I did. And I fought like a woman who knew the difference between noise and truth. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about standing in a courtroom with every file, every date, every clipped sentence they hoped I forgot, and saying, "No. I was there. And here's the proof." My voice didn't shake. Because I'd already said the most powerful thing a woman like me can say, nothing, just held the truth. And watched them break on it. They wrote me out. I wrote the ending. They changed the terms of the will. I changed the terms of who they thought I was.